Nation! Hello,
Pura vida!
And welcome to this fun fire.
Ooh.
Talking to Graceland, Grace is in her name.
It is.
And when we get sideways with each other, which does happen.
Rarely happens, but when it does.
I often find myself like, why don't you just give me some grace? And, I think you say a version of the same thing. We're asking each other for grace. And so what's grace? Well, in my world, grace is accepting what is and just getting back present to what's at hand and not off in some la la land in our own heads, right? So thinking about something that happened in the past and bringing that to the now, or worrying about something that hasn't happened, which is another mental construct and not what's really real. Because when you're in the present moment, when you're in a state of grace, you're immersed with all the possibilities of the universe. And that's such a more powerful place to be. It's such a more just like peaceful and joyful place to be, rather than, feeling kind of distraught and triggered and disconnected. So, I know that I ask you for grace, and that's kind of what I'm going for, right? Like, can we get present to right here, right now, and operate from that place of expanse. So what about for you? What does grace mean? I mean, you are Graceland after all.
I am. It's interesting. As you were just talking about that, I had this like other kind of version of looking at it that I'm not even sure that I've had before. And it's kind of like, of course, grace is multifaceted, but I think of like, when you hear about grace, when you experience it, what is that? I think about growing up, saying grace, you're giving thanks, you're appreciating what is. There's gratitude in grace, right? So it means, talk about in conflict, it's like appreciating, oh, I can see this is bothering you. I can see that you're having a different kind of experience. So there's a gratitude, there's a presence to it, but then it's also like, giving grace or receiving grace from others is, I think, also an element of like forgiveness, or it can be perceived that way, because again, it all comes back to like being fully present, and allowing, accepting what is. But I think there's like the growth and expansion side of allowing what is and recognizing that the present affords opportunities, but it's also forgiving or letting go of the past as well. So it's like, how do you experience grace fully? Is it's being fully present and accepting and allowing both what can become, or like what can come in the future, but also what has happened. And so, yeah, it's like at the root of it, I think, is presence and just acceptance, and just fully being present.
Yeah. I like how you tied that into forgiveness and also to gratitude. So I would say that that's actually really, that's even a better distinction of grace, because you're saying, not only are you accepting what is, but you're bringing the love into the equation, and you're giving grace. And so, like, that's the same thing with forgiveness. I don't really view forgiveness as you're doing it for somebody else.
For yourself, yeah.
You do, you forgive for yourself. It's for giving, right? It's coming from you, giving it out to the world. It's right there in the name, guys. And so it's the same with grace. So grace is for forgiving. And if you give it, then you're inviting the openness back into the equation. And I know we've talked about openness, but that's like where you can see the possibility and the opportunity. And so I know when I am out of grace, then my opportunity to step back into it is just to accept, what's happening, right? Like, don't fight it. Don't try to control it or feel the need to be right. And then also I think it's listening, like, what is Graceland saying to me? What am I to understand from her perspective? And I found that the more that I shut my mouth and listen, then the more graceful.
Grace is space.
I become. Grace is space.
I love that.
Boom.
No, but what you said, I think, is another key aspect of grace, because accepting and allowing, like, what is not present there is controlling or judgment, right? So it's like grace is all these expansive things and open and opportunity, but what then does not coexist with that is the need to control, the need for it to be a certain way, the judgment on it, it's not a certain way, or the judgment on it didn't go a certain way, or it can't go a certain, you know, so it's just like there's so much judgment that can creep in when our minds say this is how it should be, or this is what I needed it to be, or this is what I planned on things being like, right? And I think especially in like between people and communication, even, it's like we're our own people, and that's great and beautiful. And you know, you just, without even knowing, there's kind of a weight, or like a way that exists in your world, in your mind, that doesn't always exist with another person. And I think just judgment and just like criticality on yourself then also can bleed out into others, and like, oh, it needs to be this way because that's how it needs to be for me. And so I think you know, there's obviously different ways to unpack grace when you're talking about giving it to yourself or giving it to others. But I think at the root of it, it's the absence of judgment and control, because it's really, you know, it is forgiving. It's, you're able to create the space and the opportunity for the present moment, what is, you know, just that's the allowing that I think grace is space.
I love that.
A brief summary.
Yeah, grace is space, and yeah, grace is, you know, the presence. It's like, you know, I think about nature as being very graceful. It just works, right? And then it's like you don't see the birds fighting with the trees and trying to control the leaves and the branches. No, it works. And when you see that the universe works, when you remove your, you know, trying to control it, trying to make it go a certain way, judging it right, wrong, good or bad, then you've now entered back into the state of grace where things work, where there's opportunity and possibility. And I think that's really a great point, you know, and that's something that you can notice when you're out of grace. I mean, are you being judgmental? Are you find yourself triggered and like thinking something in your head, like, wait, that's not how I wanted it to go. That's not how they're supposed to feel about this. You know, and it becomes about you instead about what's at hand, right? So you are getting triggered because you're not accepting whatever it is, and then you're lost somewhere in your mind. And so that's, I think, you know, a blessing and an opportunity to step back into grace and to be graceful. And we're sure trying to do that here. So.
Well, yeah. So just, I mean, for yourself, ask yourself, where can I give myself more grace? Where am I looking to control or judging or being critical of myself, for one, and then in my relationships and the people that I really care about, is there an opportunity to allow more space for them to be, you know, their authentic selves, them to show up as they want to and as they're inspired to be? And, you know, how can you kind of maybe remove your vision of what needs to happen, you know, between you or even for their life? I think that it's a great opportunity to reflect. How can you give grace, space, to yourself and others? Because that's it's a really good opportunity to really just allow things to be. So
there you go. Give the grace space. That's a fun fire. See ya.
See you next time.